Hello, my name is Debbie Reynolds. They call me the Data Diva. Today I want to talk about data privacy and software development kits, also known as SDKs. So SDKs are what I consider like Lego building blocks that help app makers build apps. So it does it in a way that app makers don't have to necessarily start from scratch when they're building these apps, and it helps them do that development faster. So if there are certain building blocks that most apps may need, companies will use, or app makers will use these SDK kits. The issue with SDK kits that relate to privacy have to do with situations where app makers are taking building blocks and building apps in a way that may not be best for the audience they're trying to provide the data for. So a good example of this is, let's say a company builds an app for a pizza chain, and maybe it has certain hooks and certain things that the app is doing because they want to be able to advertise to people for pizza. Those same building blocks may not be appropriate if companies are building apps for, say, children or people with disabilities, or may have something that may be discriminatory in nature, things like that. So I think during the development process, I think it's very important that app makers need to understand what the purpose of apps are and also what are the guardrails. So if an app for, if an app for a pizza, the SDK build of an app for a pizza place may not be the same that you would use for, let's say, a health app. And we're seeing a lot of situations in the news where companies are running afoul of regulation because a lot of times those problems start at the development stage when they're putting these apps together. So maybe there are some components within those apps that may transfer over, but you have to make sure that, especially around marketing and advertising, that you don't have things or building blocks within your app that may be automatically doing advertising, that may automatically be asking for data that may not be appropriate. And a lot of that talk or those types of risk mitigations really need to happen at the development level to make sure that the people who are building the apps understand why they're building the apps, what it's for, what are the potential pitfalls so that they know what to look for. And then also downstream, as people are testing these apps, they need to make sure they're not doing any type of crazy data leakage. They're not over collecting data in the first place. They're not asking for things that maybe will cause problems down the line. Especially for me, a lot of the guardrails or a lot of the things that app developers need to think about. If an app developer is creating an app for children, an app around health, an app around finance, or app around any type of protected class. So think about sexual orientation, race, religion, those things. You need to really look very closely at the SDK and make sure that these app makers are putting the right building blocks in place. And especially if there's advertising involved, need to make sure that they're doing this in a way so that it doesn't become a situation where companies are getting fined for stuff that they may not have even known were in their apps based on what these building blocks that were used in the app development. That's it. Thank you.